My full name is Edward Charles Clarke. I was born in Annapolis Royal, the second oldest town on the North American continent. Believe it or not, 1911. I was adopted, and my adoptive father came from U.S. He had an uncle who taught him the nursery business in Rochester, New York. So he learned that. He used to sell nursery stock for his uncle on the East Coast on horseback. He never drove a car in his life. But they sent him to Nova Scotia to sell trees in the valley. And when he came, he liked what he saw, and a year or so later, he came to Nova Scotia to start his own business. My dad was Edwin Rupert Clarke. He was born in Corey, Pennsylvania. She was Florence Nightingale Harris, and she had been a seamstress in Boston. She had a brother over there worked for DuPont, but I was adopted. Of course, after they lost their first child, I guess they thought I would do, and I was baptized as an infant in the Catholic Church, and it could have been through my godmother, godfather, that they knew about it. Some things I don't know whether you want to hear or not, but oh yeah, I'm standing on my head, standing on my hands. I was practicing thinking someday I'd go on a circus. I had been to circus, and of course, you see a lot of things you've never seen before when the elephants used to help unload those circuses, and they come by train and put up those big tents. And so as a young boy, he used to go home to see his mother while she was alive, and I sometimes went with him. I never saw his mother, but I went to Philadelphia with him. He had a niece that worked there, and that's how I got to see Philadelphia. Went there one time at Christmas, and of course, being a young fellow, they had electric trains and cars this big running around the stores. I was drooling. My lower grades were in the Kiel School. That's just a little ways outside of town of Annapolis. I got up to grade 7. One recess, we were out in the schoolyard. I was standing alongside the school teacher's sister. She picked up a little stone and she threw it at an old chap who used to come by, and the kids would all tease him. Well, now, she didn't mean to harm him, but it hit him in the temple and started bleeding. Of course, he went to the teacher and reported it. One thing I was taught always, to be truthful. The girl that threw it said, "Eddie Clarke threw the stone." I went home to dinner, the noon meal, and I told my dad, and I said, "I'm going to get blamed for something I didn't do." He said, "If you know for sure that you're telling the truth, I'll let you go to town school." He took me out of school. That's how I got in town school. I didn't know which was worse, the punishment that I would have got or going to town school. I used to see ads for Harley in the magazines. Of course, I would drool for one of those after the first bike I had. But finally got it. It was no big story. It was just outlay of $500. Oh, to get it, I used to have to go sell trees up in the valley. I had to call on farmers, and I thought, oh boy. I liked the riding the bike, but I thought the people seeing me driving the bike, they think that feller's a redneck or something. My music teacher on the piano, she had gone to music school in Boston. Now she was a good musician, but she didn't try to teach me the music I want to play. I want to play jazz. That was just on the coming up. I was always interested in music. So I had joined the senior band. And, well, you could get trips to go to an exhibition or, you know, for a young fellow that was a great way to get out and see the country. Yarmouth had a contest. We won third prize. They put a special car for us on the train, sent us to Halifax, had a porter and all that. Well, of course, there's always, some boys have to have their liquor. They got the bus driver to stop and get some liquor. It stored the liquor in the bass horn. We had to stick through the handle. I was on one side and one of the other boys on the other. We got in the middle of a great big freeway and the handle broke. So that caused a little kerfluffle. They gave it to me and said, this is a clarinet, take it home and learn to play it. They also gave me the chart, finger chart, which looked like a bunch of Chinese writing to me. I went from there to saxophone. I played tenor sax in the band. Later played alto sax in the band, but I played tenor sax in a dance band later on. Played for 10 years, from 60 to 70, when the rock and roll started. We were playing all big band tunes that I hear over the satellite radio now, but we just played low. Everybody was working. We didn't do it as a business. I suppose I was in my early 20s when my dad moved out, and I used to work in the office. I didn't know how to type, but the typewriter was there, and I would write up the orders and mail catalogs, and a lot of labor-intensive, the way our business was run. I lived in Annapolis for a while. The first, the first 30 years, actually. I got married when I was 29. I met my wife at a dance, and had a dance with her and took her home. I lived in Annapolis, she lived in Digby. That was a 20-mile hike. But that started it. Well, she was working in a grocery store for $12 a week, and the old fella, her boss, had money, but sometimes she'd have to wait for her money and all that sort of thing. She wanted to be a nurse. We went together 3 or 4 years before we were married. went to Halifax to be married. Uh, my dad stood up with us. He was still living. We were married in the Church of England. We came back home and told the folks we'd been married, decided we'd go on a honeymoon. So I had a car but didn't have a trailer. And I borrowed a trailer from a friend. We went to Cape Breton. We had a lot of fun after we both retired, camping. I made 10 trips to Florida. We had different campers and started with a 13-foot, well, there used to be boulders, but mine was a different name, but it was the same thing, 13-foot plastic bubble on wheels. A chap from Newfoundland had started an egg farm down shore here. He built his own camper on the back of a truck. So he brought that where I was working, traded in, bought something different. Well, I thought, gee, that'd be a good rig for going to Florida. So I bought that. We called it the Tilton Hilton. In '77, we went to Europe. And we were 31 days in Europe, all good hotels, transportation, the whole bit, except we flew to Amsterdam, and we were three days, I think, in Amsterdam. We went down through the Ruhr Valley, through Germany, Austria, Switzerland, down into Italy, and back up through France, and back to England. And somehow we got back to Rome to fly back. $2,000 apiece. I ended up in the Air Force. We joined in Halifax and came down here to get uniforms. They had too big and too small, and wouldn't fit, and all that sort of thing. We're not a very presentable looking crew, but got moved from here to Fredericton, I think. And we were being taught a very highly secretive operation in those days in these colleges. Went from Fredericton to London, Ontario, went to college there. And I remustered to electrician. Well, they sent us down south of London, Ontario. That's where we were quartered. They had built a lot of new housing for people with mental problems. It had never been occupied before, so we got in there. But anyway, that's where we were quartered. Went, of course, from there to Manning Depot and spent some time there, and then I came down to the East Coast. I was with a bomber reconnaissance unit first. They decided to open an electrical section, so they gave me a shop and help, and I spent most of my time. From then on, that's what I was doing. That was in Stadacona there, just down below Dartmouth. I had one friend, he lived right across the hall from me. When he'd go up the mess hall up the hill at night, he would get a couple pieces of bread, and if he'd make a sandwich of some kind, whatever he could find, and he'd bring that down, put it on his table there in his room. So I was talking to his buddy there one night, and I said, well, let's take and hide Boudreaux's sandwich, and we'll, we won't destroy it, we just hide it. So I went down the hangar, got a couple of pieces of bread, a piece of gasket cork, cut it a little bit underneath the size of the bread, put some of his relish around the outside, and put it on his table. He always got up with his shirt in one hand and sandwich in the other, trying to get down to parade on time. But he took one bite. You could see the teeth marks in the cork, and he threw it down on the table. He didn't know for sure who did it. Some of my wife's relatives worked in or lived in Ottawa. She married a chap from Ottawa. So they were home on vacation, and when I saw them, they knew I was looking for work. He said, why don't you come to Ottawa? I said, probably get you a job. So I had a job the first day I was up there. I worked there till they got sick, and I had to come home. I had hepatitis, and it tied me up for quite a while. I couldn't do much manual work, but a friend down the hill there had a service station. I went bookkeeper for him. Gradually outgrew it and kept going. And I guess I'm 102 now. The first one, I was in Ontario somewhere, and my first one was born in Digby. Of course, I got the news right away, but my wife brought him up to Ontario, where I was, and we went to a place that we could board, like, while she was there. Actually, we left him there one weekend and went to Niagara Falls together. Terry was cesarean birth. I must have been away when he was born too. My girl was born last. She was the youngest. Yeah. Yeah, I was home when she was born. Not here, but she was born in Digby. We had a friend that was a nurse who worked in the hospital, and said, Helen is so sick that she had cesarean birth, and she wouldn't want to see you. Well, I was on the road at the time, and I thought, well, if that's the case, I won't go. But I went and did my work, didn't see her till the end of the week, which wasn't right, but I did what I thought was right, but it didn't turn out that way. But I guess you make a few mistakes in this world. A boy all over again. Fly kites, and I learned how to make box kites, and the Hale and I would fly them here in the backfield, and we're right in the flight path of Air Canada, so we had to abandon that. We used to go over in a field here where the houses are all there now, but I often wonder if that's where he first got interested in flying, because he had a plane for years. My model sailboat went in the lake out here that